All right, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and start now. So what I wanted to do with this first webinar is I wanted to provide everybody with the necessary information about the basic building blocks that make up the ADA. So what I wanted to start off with is to just kind of go over what are the 5 titles of the ADA. If you had to list them out, do you think that you could list all 5 titles of the ADA? Most people can't. So I'm going to go a little bit out of order because I'm going to save the Title II portion, which is going to speak to all of you as you are with municipalities of, city, state, or local governments. So, but I just wanted to touch on what the other titles are so that you have that information available to you. So the first title, you see there's a lot of language there, but what does that really mean? It just means that Title I of the ADA prohibits discrimination of individuals with disabilities within the hiring, firing, and advancement within an organization. That's why oftentimes you'll see somebody who's in HR that manages or is the ADA coordinator for a municipality, because there's a lot of regulations and a lot of content that goes into the Title I. So that does apply, although that's not what the topic is of today. So I wanted to go now to Title III. What this states is that no individual shall be discriminated against on the basis of disability in the full and equal enjoyment of the goods, services, facilities, privileges, advantages, or accommodations of any place of public accommodation by a private entity. So what does that mean? Where Title II, the governing agency, must make reasonable accommodation, Title III instills the thought process of readily achievable. What is readily achievable? Readily achievable is defined as easily achievable for a small business or local business. This is a balancing test between the cost of a proposed fix and the fiscal impact on a business. Obviously, a larger corporation is going to be more capable to make modifications than that of a small mom and pop restaurant or storefront or something of that nature. Title IV establishes functional requirements, guidelines, and operation procedures for telecommunications relay services. It's meant to establish initial guidelines that make allowances for individuals requiring telecommunication services, encourage the use of technology to enhance and grow the methods telecommunication services are provided to individuals. The final title is except as otherwise provided in this act, nothing in this act shall be construed to apply a lesser standard than the standards applied under Title V of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. What that means is that it's to ensure the more stringent administrative policies are applied. So Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act provides a more stringent policy versus the ADA, the more stringent law applies. That actually has a lot to do with the Title II agencies, because oftentimes people think, well, I don't have 50 or more employees, so I don't have to comply with all of the administrative requirements that are outlined in Title II. When in fact, if you look into the Rehabilitation Act, there's a clause in there that states that if you receive any kind of federal funding, regardless of how big your agency is, that you're required to comply with the administrative requirements. It further ensures that no rights previously awarded to an individual shall be eliminated in the efforts to comply with the ADA. So now I really want to kind of dive into Title II a little bit more and the 5 administrative requirements that I've somewhat touched on already. So what Title II is it's to prohibit discrimination on the basis of disability by public entities in all services, programs, activities provided by or made available by public entities. Essentially, if a service, a program, or activity is inaccessible by an individual, modifications such as some of the following will need to be made: rules, policies, practices, removal of barriers, provision of auxiliary aids and services. So The test is, can an individual meet the eligibility, if they meet the eligibility requirements and still enjoy the same participation in a service, a program, or activity provided by a government agency. It also incorporates the 5 administrative requirements. This is what I think is very difficult for many local agencies in complying, because it seems so broad and there's so much information about it, but not a lot of information on how to actually comply with the requirements. So we're going to kind of touch on each one of these a little bit. The first one is a self-evaluation. This is oftentimes confused with a transition plan. A lot of agencies think that a self-evaluation is intended to identify physical barriers in the compilation of making your transition plan, when in fact it's actually a review of your services, including your policies, your procedures, and your practices, which I refer to as the 3 Ps. And this is just to determine compliance. So it's really meant to be an internal audit to find administrative barriers and what of the 3 Ps need to be remediated to ensure compliance. The next administrative requirement is notice, and this is to ensure individuals, so applicants, participants, beneficiaries, and any other interested party is apprised of the protections afforded to them by the law. Beyond that, we now go to the complaint procedure. This is more commonly known as a grievance procedure, and this is meant to provide an avenue to individuals to communicate with the agency a concern surrounding a potential barrier or exclusion to a service, a program, or activity. This allows the agency to remediate an issue without the need for unnecessary and costly litigation. Oftentimes I've found that if an individual feels that an agency cares about their actual complaint, they don't want to escalate the complaint. They really just want to see a specific barrier or issue remediated to, continue on with their life. So if you find that with a good and active complaint or grievance procedure, that you will mitigate a lot of the complaining that goes on to the higher ups, the Department of Justice, the State Department, anybody else that may be governing your agency specifically. Next, we have the transition plan. And this is intended to provide the agency with the roadmap necessary to complete the necessary structural modification. There isn't a lot in the law and the regulations that tells you how to manage and maintain your transition plan, but the law does state that at a minimum, it should identify physical obstacles, the methods used to make obstacles accessible, the schedule, steps necessary to comply, and the individual responsible to implement the plan. Now, the final administrative requirement is a responsible employee. I've seen more times than not where I can call an agency and speak to an ADA coordinator and people go, "What's an ADA coordinator?" Well, it's actually the person responsible for coordinating all of the accessibility requests for the governing agency. There's a lot of weight that's actually put on the ADA coordinator's shoulders, because they're supposed to facilitate grievances, they're supposed to make modifications to programs, providing auxiliary aids, documentation in alternative formats. They are the face of the ADA program for everyone in all of their jurisdictions. So any of their constituents that may have a request or a reasonable modification, they are to go to their ADA coordinator. So basically, there is a lot in terms of the laws, and the ADA touches in so many different ways that it's very difficult, and more agencies find that it's just easier not to deal with it, and so then they end up finding themselves in situations where they're no longer in compliance. And now that the tides have changed some as far as the regulating agencies, there's a lot more agencies that are coming in and doing voluntary compliance agreements. That's something that the DOJ does, where they'll survey 10% of an agency, and if they're finding that they don't think that they're in compliance, then they're going to go after the actual agency to finish reviewing everything, make modifications, resurvey everything, and then they'll put a dollar amount on it that seems so fiscally unreasonable, and they just don't know where to go. So what we want to try to do is kind of bring the awareness up for individuals that are responsible for these pieces, so that they have the tools that they need to comply. So essentially, the question I have is, what if you had a tool that helped you manage everything all in one location, allowing you to use the staff that you already have? What we intend to do is we want to provide you with the tools that you need to get compliant and then remain compliant. In the next web series, or the next webinars that we're going to be going over, we're going to be discussing all of these different issues: grievances, notices, self-evaluation, transition plans, site assessments, all of this, and what are different ways in which you can manage all of this information without actually having to procure, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars in contracts just to get a snapshot of what your compliance is, but actually provides you with a plan to remain compliant from day one until the end of days. So basically that's the end of this web series. I don't know if you have any questions. I haven't seen any come across at this point. But I'd love to have you, if you have any questions, you could use the webinar chat feature or the Q&A button that's listed on the bottom of your screen. I'll go ahead and I'll keep this open here just for a minute if anybody has any questions or any comments or thoughts. All right, so I have a question. What it states here is, what do you do if you are a small agency and you have never been compliant? You don't really know what to do. How do you even start when you're so far behind? You know, we realize that the ADA has been enacted for over 25 years, and you know, when you still reach out to local agencies and they say, hey, you know, I don't even know who my ADA coordinator is, let alone what's my transition plan, a self-evaluation. So, you know, there's multiple ways in which you can address your compliance. And I know some agencies use tools that are built into like Word, Excel. They use different GIS project or inventory lists. There's all kinds of different methods in which you can do it. One of the nice things about our product that we have is everything is done right in this one central location. So you can do site assessments with your own personnel. You can do self-evaluations. You can manage and track all of your notices. You can create a living transition plan, which is unlike any transition plan that you're going to see in any local agency. I know that you ask almost any organization, hey, can I see your transition plan? More than half of them are going to go behind their desk, pull out an old binder that was, you know, created in 1992. They're going to blow off the dust and they're going to say, here you go. Well, what have you done? Have you modified anything? Have you managed this? Where are you now? And that's the big question, is they have no idea where they are. So what's important is to not only create these things, but to keep them managed, because you want to ensure you have the protections for yourself to ensure if you do have an enforcing agency come in, what do you do? How do you go about the next thing? How do you make sure that you've complied? How do you make sure that you're protected? So you have to keep track of, okay, yeah, that was an identified barrier, but I fixed it in 2000, or it's still currently on my transition plan, or I have a project assigned to it. There's, you know, those are all the different things that you have to make sure that you manage appropriately to remain compliant. Okay, I have another question. It says, do I have to update my transition plan annually? You don't have to. There's no regulation that states how often you have to update your transition plan. Although a transition plan, unless it's a living document, it's a snapshot of what your compliance is right now. So things consistently are going to change. You're going to have laws and regulations that are going to change. You're going to have requests that are going to come from the public that's going to change things. Everything is going to evolve. So, you know, it's best to keep track of all of that information. You know, when you look at a transition plan is a snapshot in this day and time, you have to realize that unless you keep and manage that transition plan in a year or 2 years, it's no longer active. It's no longer compliant because it's no longer current. So no, there's no regulation that states that you have to update it on at a specific time point, but there is the expectation that you have to keep and manage your transition plan. I don't know if I have any other questions. I would love to answer questions for you if you have anything else. All right, it looks like I don't have any other questions, so I'm going to go ahead and work on concluding this first webinar. If you have any questions after reviewing the information that we presented, you know, please feel free to contact us. You could go to our website at BlueDAG.com. You can contact me via email at LDENHAM, so LDenham @BlueDAG.com. And we would love to provide you more information with regards to our tools. I'm hopeful that you're gonna take this information and wanna go to the subsequent webinars that we have scheduled. We have one this Friday, and then we have some next week on Tuesday and Thursday. So I'd love to have you attend. We will go ahead and submit a copy of this to our BlueDAG channel so that you can review the information. And if you would like to see the PowerPoint presentation that I did today and you want to have a copy of that, you know, feel free to contact me and I'd be more than happy to submit that to you. So once again, I want to thank you all for coming and hope to see you at the next webinar.